Yes, yes, yes. Now we will start. We will start now.
Okay.
Good noon, all. I take this opportunity to welcome our speaker, Mr. Vikas Saxena, our advisor, and all the participants for the second session of day 5. I would like to request our advisor to introduce and invite our speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Vikas Saxena ji.
Good afternoon.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to the audience. Mr. Vikas Saxena is an electrical engineer graduate from IIT BHU, Banaras Hindu University, presently IIT Varanasi, and is having a diverse experience of 40 years in the power sector, encompassing power system design, coal-based thermal station design, and operation and maintenance of solar thermal and solar PV power plant design, power system protection, etc. He has worked with NTPC and Power Grid up to the level of general manager before switching to private sector in the year 2008, and then as at president level with Jindal Power Limited, Lalitpur Power Generating Company, and ACME. He has done several international consultant assignments. He has worked with Power Grid and NTPC at the general manager level. He has done several international consulting assignments of power utilities of Bhutan, Dubai, and Nigeria. He is a recipient of Central Board of Irrigation and Power's Special Recognition Award for outstanding contribution in the field of power system protection. He has earlier been chairman of Indian National Subcommittee of SIGRE B5 and member of several working groups of SIGRE and also member of several technical committees of BIS. With this brief introduction, I hand over the platform to Mr. Vikas Saxena. Sir.
So shall I start now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can start.
Okay. So what we are going to do today is we'll talk about solar power integration into the grid. And for that, we'll talk a bit about the solar power characteristics and the grid and what all is involved in grid management. And then we talk of various ways of mitigating the issues which are solar power as opposed to the conventional power, and different ways, and then what commercially is getting done. Also, we'll speak a little bit about what is getting done in our country, right? So we all know that our grid is predominantly consists of generation from fossil fuels, and these fossil fuels, they have pollution problem, as also these are resources which will get depleted one day, and these are non-renewable. So we want to save on the environment, as also we want to save on the fossil fuels, and that is why it becomes very relevant to increase the use of renewable sources for electricity generation. And as far as the solar power is concerned, the two major for solar power generation are: one is the gradients. For solar thermal, it is direct normal. For you need to for large scale solar, you need a lot of land. You need around 4.5 to 4 to 5 acres of land per megawatt. We have barren land available with us. So with these two major requirements, we are well placed to go for large scale solar integration into our grid. And the solar power tariffs have been declining because the solar power, the PV panel prices have been going down. Chiefly, it is over a period of time that these prices of the panels have been going down. And if you consider a solar photovoltaic plant, the capital cost, around 50 to 60% of the plant cost is taken by the solar photovoltaic panel, and then you have inverters and other things which are smaller contributors to the capital cost of the plant. If I remember that the first plant which I did, a 15 megawatt plant in solar in at that time, per kilowatt price was something like $1.33, and now it is around 20 cents. So there has been a huge reduction, and with that the tariff, which at that point of time it was what we got for that plant was 15 rupees per unit for 12 years, and thereafter 5 rupees. So it amounted to around a tariff of levelized tariff of, I hope you understand what is levelized tariff. A levelized tariff of about 12 rupees 50 per kilowatt in the year 2000. Now we have seen recently tariffs as low as 2 rupees 36 paise, which is low current even. And we all know that government has set a target of 175 gigawatt of renewable power by the year 2022. And out of this 175, 100 gigawatt target is for solar power. And then by 2027, we have target of about 275 gigawatt, and probably we are talking of 400 gigawatt by the year 2030. So as the proportion of solar power into the grid, when the solar power, or let's say renewable power, wind and solar power, as long as the proportion is small, grid operation will not be affected to that extent, and was not probably that important. But now with the proportion of renewable power into the grid going up and up, the grid integration issues need serious looking at, and they are being addressed. This is a map of global horizontal radiation in the country, and you can see that we have in the area of Gujarat and Rajasthan. Very good. The darker you have a scale of radiation, darker it is better radiation availability. So these two states have very good radiation, and these are the two states where where most of the plants have come up. Then also in Karnataka and also MP and Andhra and Maharashtra also have many installations. As you would say, this side doesn't have as good radiation, and they are not very suitable for installation of photovoltaic plants. Now, solar power generation, if we talk of, there are two ways of generating electricity through the energy received from the sun, and one is the solar thermal, which is also called sometimes concentrated solar power, CSP. Now, in this, you make use of the heat energy which you reduce from the sun, and this heat is utilized to produce steam, and thereafter it is like any plant where you use steam turbine, and you also have all those rotating machinery. Apart from the turbine and generator, you have boiler feed pump, you have condenser, you have all the paraphernalia for like a conventional plant. It's mainly the solar thing is the collecting the heat to produce steam. One major advantage with the solar thermal plant is that here you can store heat by using phase change materials. You can store heat. You can put extra collectors. You store heat, and when the sun is not available to make the peak time part, you can take that heat and again when the for the CSP plants, there are different technologies like parabolic troughs. Parabolic troughs is the technology which has been most widely used, largely in Spain and US, California area, Mojave Desert. You have also technology of parabolic dishes. These are more dishes are more suitable for concentrated for a smaller this thing installation. You also have tower type solar thermal plants where there is a boiler sitting on the top of a tower. I have not put, let's say I implemented a 2.5 megawatt developmental project in Bikaner in the year 2009-10, and we had used a roughly 1 square meter mirrors, roughly 4,000 mirrors for 2.5 megawatt plant, and with these mirrors are tracking the sun, and are these are called heliostats. These heliostats they track the sun, and they can move on the two axes. Both the axes they can move, and main technology in this is of that heliostat tracking the sun, and we had gotten into a collaboration with a firm from US, and we implemented this 2.5 megawatt, but there were problems. Like the technology was very good. There was no problem, but then the irradiation which was expected was not there. At that point of time, 10 years back, there were no measured values available for DNI in India, and there was some data available from in public domain from NASA, and those were all not measured data, but based on certain algorithms, they had extrapolated what is to be expected. And while we expected a radiation of about around 6 kilowatt hour per meter square per day, what we actually were getting was around 4.5, 4.6. That is 25% lower, and obviously such a plant in a desert area, you get one day you get very good radiation, and another day there is dust all around, sand all around. So not really. Let me say that at that point of time, it was initially we thought the government thought, and Jawaharlal Nehru Solar Mission when it was launched, thought that we'll be developing half of thermal and photovoltaic. But later on we realized that solar thermal doesn't have. We are not getting such a good radiation in the country. Now later on we have been to photovoltaics. And which solar photovoltaics? Because despite all the dust and present in the atmosphere, so photovoltaic panels can work on diffused radiation also. So as we have seen that tariffs have been falling down and they have achieved feedback. Now, solar photovoltaics, unlike thermal, here you use the sunlight to generate direct to the photovoltaic effect, and then using the inverters, you convert DC to AC. Of course, output is dependent on the solar radiation available at any point of time, and you cannot control. Here is the difference as compared to the conventional plant. You cannot control it as per your wish. The solar radiation, the fuel is as available by the given by the nature. Where is in a coal-fired station, you can fire more and generate more or less. So you cannot here really control the way you want to. Let me mention that because here the sunlight is available for free, and you have invested money in the plant, it is and you want to utilize the solar power as much as possible. So these generators, the solar power generators, they enjoy must-run status. So that it has been mandated that these plants will be run fast, will have the more priority as some other plants, unless there is a issue of the grid security. If there is a issue in the transmission system and it endangers the grid security, these plants will enjoy the must-run status. It is a simple schematic where you have the solar panels, and these solar panels will be depending on your configuration and the panel which you are using, and the voltage which you are getting from the panel, DC voltage, and the current. Arrange them into tables, and tables will run through junction boxes to the inverters, and then you will put step-up transformer and it will get connected to the grid. Depending on what is the size of your solar plant, you can connect it to 11 kV, 33 kV, 220 kV, or 400 kV. Now we are having plants which are getting to 220 kV or 400 kV even. This plant, this is a curve which is showing this is a actual curve of a 25 megawatt plant in Chhattisgarh, and you will see that the generation starts around 6 o'clock, goes up as the sun goes up, and there up to around 6 o'clock. During this point, this curve will keep on changing depending on the season and the radiation availability. Here the various these variations are seen because of the clouds being there. On a good sunny day, you will expect it to go like this, go up and then come down. A smooth curve. Ideally, it will be a smooth curve. But when there are clouds, this will keep on going up and down. Clouds there. This one has got a generation of maximum on that day about 22 megawatt, a 25 megawatt rated plant. So we see that generation is not controllable by us. Generation is available only when the sun is there, and also this can have a lot of intermittency. Let us take a look on the generation capacity presently available on our grid. we have presently approximately total generation capacity of 372 gigawatts, and which is largely dominated by the thermal power, which is 62%, hydro is 12%, nuclear is very small, about 1.8%, and renewables are now around 24%. Now, out of those renewables, it is largely consisting of about 10% of wind and 10% of solar. Whereas there are also a small percentage of small hydro and biomass. Now, we see that now presently solar is around 10% of the total capacity, and as it increases from that is around 35. Presently, it is total renewables are 88 gigawatt. Out of this, 35 gigawatt is solar. Now, as it goes up to 100 gigawatt and later on to more, the percentage of the renewable power is going to get very, very large, and that will bring its attendant issues into more focus, and it can have problems for the grid operator. This is a demand pattern for 2 days for June and July of 2019, and here you will see that the power served is in excess of about 180 gigawatt, 182 gigawatt, whereas we have presently the total generation capacity of about we said 370 gigawatt. So we have a lot of generation available now in the grid, as opposed to our times when we started way back around 30-40 years back. We used to be deficit, really deficit. As opposed to that, now in the recent years there has been a lot of generation addition, especially after the changes brought in by the Electricity Act of 2003 and delicensing of generation and all that. A lot of private players have put in the capacities, and we are well placed as far as the generation capacity is concerned. About the grid, historically, we have purposes. We have divided the country into 5 regional grids: north, west, south, and east and northeast. Presently, these grids are connected synchronously, but in earlier times, these grids used to operate separately. Historically, they will balance their own generation and load, and there was a lot of frequency mismatch too between the regions. So one grid might be operating, let's say, at a frequency of 49, and another fellow might be operating at 48.5, and they were not very conducive for getting connected synchronously. There were some states where from one region to other were getting some loads of a state were getting connected, but then they were connected in a radial mode and not synchronously. Then came the HVDC links, and as you know that in HVDC there are synchronous links, and they can connect to two systems operating at different frequencies. As also there you can control the power. You can't control the control the power flow. Whereas in HVDC links, you have a kind of a valve where you can vary the flow.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, we are not able to see your slide, sir. Can you share the slide once again?
Oh, so should I stop and do it again? Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You unshare it and once again share it, sir.
Oh, Okay, just a minute.
Yes, sir.
I think he has to mute his photo, camera.
Yes, sir. You.
You tell him.
Yes, sir.
Ajay, is there?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, full overview. It's in a. Put it in a slideshow mode, sir.
It is a normal mode, sir. Yeah, now
Yes,
it's there.
yes. Now it's okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what we are saying that we have 5 regional grids, and these are now presently we have all of them are connected synchronously, and then we get the advantage of it becomes a very large system, and we have the advantage of a large inertia of such a huge grid. One important thing about our grid is that the natural resources are not uniformly distributed. You can't expect it to be. We have coals in the coal deposits in largely in eastern region, and then hydro in the northern region and northeastern region. So like that, so which requires a lot of transmission of power. Typically in our system, WR and SR are WR and ER are generally exporting regions, whereas northern region and southern region are the importing regions. Northeast is a comparatively small this thing which have hydropowers, but during the winters it will need to import the power. This is a slight. We don't need to go to specific figures, but it is just giving you information about how much of the transmission lines we have. 44,030 kilometers of 765. Our largest transmission line voltage is 765 kV, and we have 400 kV and 220 down below. And we have these transmission capacities. The substation transformation capacities. And then on HVDC, we have HVDC initially, earlier days, we used to have plus minus 500 kV, and we have a total HVDC capacity of 13,500 megawatt. And later date installations are now plus minus 800 kV. There we have a total capacity of 1,200 megawatt. Now, the important thing is that, as we said, that we have some regions which are deficit in power, some regions which have more generation available. So a lot of power is to be transferred from one region to other region, and that is where the interregional transfer capacity becomes important. Typically, when you see probably you will see that so much of interregional transmission capacity is available, which will be a very big figure, but there is a fallacy there in the sense that that capacity is the capacity of each element and all added together arithmetically. But in an integrated system, that doesn't happen. When you have several connections between two regions, the power will not flow equally on all those links in proportion to their capacity, but it will flow as per the network parameters. So this gives you we have a capacity of WR to SR of around 7,000 megawatt, WR to NR of 18,000 megawatt, and so on. That I have used here two terms which are TTC, the total transmission capability, and ATC of available transmission capability. This is the difference between the two is that for the grid operation, you keep some margin depending on your assessment of what all not the contingencies but the deviations in the flows which can happen. So you keep some like WRSR, you have a margin of 500 megawatt. For some region, you have 250 megawatt and all. So these are this is just to give you an idea of how much inter-regional transfer capabilities we have. And I have given the figures here, like WR to SR. There will also be this is directional actually. There is a capacity around SR to WR will also be there, which may be a different figure, but that is not relevant for us because the flows are generally from WR to SR and WR to NR, not vice versa. Then for the grid management hierarchy is that at the bottom you have state load dispatch centers, which are required to do the balancing within their states, and whatever is required deficit or extra, that can go out to other states or other regions. So SLDC at the bottom of the pyramid, there are SLDCs. Above that, there are RLDCs, the regional load dispatch centers. They will since a region consists of so many states, they will ensure the integrated operation of the regional grid. And as the apex, you have national load dispatch center, which will be controlling the power flows from one region to another region. So now, what the grid management really entails? This is really the three things. One is the frequency control, that is balancing the generation and load. Other is the voltage control. You manage the VAR, and then you see to it that none of the equipments or lines, transformers or lines are getting overloaded, because these lines they will have a thermal loading available. Thermal loading depending on the temperature, ambient temperature, wind, and all that. So there will be a thermal rating of the line. Also, based on the angular stability point of view, also there will be limitation to line loadings, and the transformers based on their MVA rating, you will have their loadability limits, and these need to be honored. Otherwise, if you overload them, then you lose the life, and if you overload them too much, then maybe they trip out, which will create more problems. If one transformer trips, then the other elements in the system, they will need to share that power flow, and then maybe they can get overloaded. So the grid operator has to see it, also see to it that the equipments are not and lines are not going beyond their normal loadings. You will also have a emergency loading limit available. These are all given in the relevant manuals, that under the normal system, you will observe some certain loading limits. And when a contingency occurs, like which is called, we plan our system on N-1 contingency basis. So if a contingency occurs, so if one line is lost or this thing, that then is still without curtailing any load, the system should not be required to back down any generation or cut any load. That is called N-1 condition. But then there is a possibility also of another element going out, which will be N-1 So for that, there are emergency loadings are permitted. Now let's go to frequency control. What the grid code provides, and this is generally now what I'm talking is with reference to this. Then let me, how much time is available now? Hello. Okay, now I go to frequency control. As
Sir,
per the
it's
grid code.
12:40. You have, hello.
Yes.
Sir, you have 10 minutes. It's till 1:30, sir. Now it's only
Okay, fine.
12:40. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So we should be able to do it. Now the frequency control, the grid code, which is issued by the CERC, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, that we want to maintain the frequency in the from between 49.9 to 50.005 hertz band. This is something which is younger people will not be able to realize that in about 20-30 years back, we used to have our system running at as low as 48.5 or even up to 48 hertz. So a lot of changes have taken place. A lot of generation has got added, and a commercial mechanism got added, because of which the discipline has come into the grid, which I will be talking about in next slide. So, and these generators are required to set their governors in such a manner, because these rotating machines, you have inertia available, you have also a limit, what is called wide valve operation. When you are a generator of, let's say, 500 megawatt thermal generator, you will have a 5% of that extra available, which is called wide valve operation, valve wide open operation, VWO, where the 5% it can of the rating it can pick up if required. If a generator trips, then the frequency will tend to go down, and then the governor will act, and it will inject more power. In the meantime, then the generators will pick up the load to bring it back to the nominal frequency. So we have the governors are set to such that up to 50%, 50 hertz frequency, there is no load reduction. For any fall in grid frequency, generation unit shall increase its generation as per the droop up to maximum of 5%. And a dead band in the governor will be provided up to plus minus 0.03 hertz, so as to avoid any hunting of governors for a small change in frequency. Grid code provides that generators will have a droop setting of 3 to 6%. This is required for the parallel operation of the generators. And droop essentially means that from it is the percentage change in speed or frequency when you go from no load to full load. And also this provision long time back, this provision was not there. Even I think few years back, that generators used to utilize that VWO capacity also sometimes for the getting scheduled. But now the grid code does not allow the scheduling of any generator more than its maximum continuous rating. So that 5% of VWO condition is available to provide the primary response in case of any requirement of like, let's say, if a big generator trips because of any problem with that generator at any point of time, now there will be a deficit in the system of the megawatts, and then this will cause those generators to initially slow down. Hello. There is a lot of noise now. Hello.
I think you have to mute everybody. Hello.
Yeah. So, and then you have also if in case of a multiple contingencies, if the frequency is going down, then depending on the rate of change of the frequency, you can have under frequency load shedding. Because then if it is becoming, you are not able to control, then you have to go for the, if the generator has gone out, you also may have to shed the load. And as a last resort, if there is a larger disturbance, then maybe you may have to island yourself. So these are all the grid defense mechanisms. As I said earlier, that for the controlling of the frequency, earlier we had a very indisciplined grid operation in our country, where it was being accounted on 24-hour basis. So there were people, constituents, let's say, who will, when the frequency is running low, they will overdraw beyond their schedule and then push back power in the night. When the frequency is running high, they will, so they are squaring off their deviations, but creating problem for the grid. So then 90 onwards, this work started on availability based tariff and frequency linked availability based tariff, which was implemented finally by 2002 to 3, which has greatly helped in grid discipline. And the tariff for the conventional plants essentially consists of two parts, which is fixed charges. Fixed charges are such that even if nobody is that their power is not getting scheduled, if they have a PPA and the beneficiary is not wanting to draw the power, they should still get their investment back. So one part is fixed charges, other part is the capacity charges, which is they have to burn the fuel, the oil and the coal, and they will get in proportion to what they operate. So they have your fixed charges, capacity charges, and then also you will have variable charges based on the schedule. This is essentially for the purpose of payment, that you get a certain schedule, but the actual dispatch may not be as exactly as per schedule. So there will be some deviations because of the whatever reasons. So you have the charges for deviations, that you have certain schedule and then you are not operating as per that, and there will be charges for the deviation. Now let me say that the solar plants or wind plants do not have this two-part tariff of fixed charges and capacity charges. They will have a composite tariff, because they cannot control the availability of fuel. They cannot vary the fuel. So it is logical to have only one part tariff. So for inculcating the discipline, presently the scheduling is done on 15-minute block basis, and the charges for the deviation are based on the in each 15-minute block, depending on the frequency. If the system is running on a low frequency, and if at that point of time somebody is overdrawing, the buyer is overdrawing, he is not doing good for the grid, so his deviation will be charged at a higher rate. Similarly, if frequency is running high and a generator is pushing more power, he is not helping the grid, and then that extra power which he is pushing, he may get paid at a very low rate, or he may not get paid at all, even though he is burning coal. So this is the commercial mechanism which has brought in a lot of frequency control, and today we are seeing that we are maintaining that frequency band of 49.9 to 50.05. And voltage control from the from the planning stage, you provide the adequate reactive compensation into the system, and then for controlling the voltage, the grid operators can get the shunt reactors at 400 kV and 765 kV. You provide shunt reactors for controlling the voltage. Those can be switched in or switched out. You can, for voltage control, you can change the taps of the interconnecting transformers. So these are the measures which you can, and then the AVRs have to be in service. So these are the, and of course, beyond that, generators have those inherent capability on the conventional generators to generate or absorb reactive power, and they need to operate as per the load dispatch center instructions. So these, why I am talking of all this, that these generators, these conventional generators, that those capabilities which they have inherently are not available with the solar plants. We don't have that capabilities to vary the power at will, which is the megawatt in solar plants, and nor the reactive power. So now, having identified those major characteristics, we are listing the what are really the issues. So one thing, major thing is that generation is available only during time, when daytime, when the sun is up, and then as in the morning it will be low, and it will peak at some time, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then it starts going down when the sun goes down. Whereas we saw in the demand curve, when we saw that the peak comes, the major peak, evening peak comes around from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock kind of thing. So that is when the most of the power is required. Then the solar generation is not available. Then we have the problem of the intermittency, that the generation can keep on going up and down. So that creates problem of the forecasting and scheduling. Because unless the forecasting is good, you cannot do the scheduling of power, and it can create problem. Because if that sun is going, if the solar power is going down, then it needs to come from elsewhere, and needs to come from elsewhere very fast to fill in that deficit. It doesn't have any inertia, as we saw in case of conventional plant, and where conventional plant can provide the primary response. Solar generation inherently doesn't have this possibility. And war support, again, it doesn't have that inherent. You need to make extra provisions for that. Then, because of the use of inverters, you produce harmonics in that when you are generating and feeding the grid with PV, solar power. Apart from that, since these solar photovoltaic plants will be located in the areas where, as we said, that where good generation, good irradiation is available, as well as where the land is available, in plenty barren land, which is of not any other use. So there will be specific geographical locations where you will be putting your plants, which may be away from the existing network. So new network expansion will need to be planned. Apart from the investment that is required for the new network, it is also to be kept in mind that while the solar plants can be installed in the much shorter time period, let's say 1 year to 18 months, a 300 megawatt plant can come up in 18 months. Whereas the transmission lines, which are running cross country, a lot of there will be environmental issues, the right of way issues, and also the construction. It may take longer. It will take, let's say, after award, it may take about 24 months. And before the award, you might be aware that now transmission also is in a is also competitively bid. So there will be time taken for the bidding for those transmission system where the private participants can participate. So there will be a good amount of time. So easily you can consider for a new transmission system to come may take 3 to 4 years, whereas solar plant comes in much lesser time. So it is important, it is important that we build up the transmission systems, keep them ready in time so that wherever the solar plant developers are likely to come up, they get the transmission infrastructure in place so that their investment can be started being utilized at the earliest. Now, this also poses a problem in the sense that once a transmission system is being built, and supposing it has been built in advance, if no power is flowing on that, still that transmission system, whosoever, let's say a private participant or a Power Grid has put up that system, that transmission system needs to get paid for. Because somebody has made an investment, he needs to realize back his investment, and if there is no power flowing on that, then that becomes an extra burden on the electricity boards and the other constituents, because that will again get reflected without extra power getting flown. That will get built up into the tariff. So there are issues. These issues are there, and there is no straight answer to that. But there is an issue. Also, that we saw that solar power gets generated during the daytime, and if nighttime there is no power flow, then the impact of this on the transmission of per unit of power is higher as compared to, let's say, a conventional plant which is running 24 hours, which we call RTC, round the clock. There it is utilizing the transmission asset all the time, whereas here the utilization of the transmission asset is for a limited period of time. And let me also say that presently, even though this is the characteristic of solar power, but presently, in order to encourage more and more installation of solar power plants, the solar generation is exempted from the interstate transmission charges. What it means that transmission asset has been put up, all right, but if it is not reflecting into the tariffs of the solar power, this tariff will in any way will be realized, but it gets loaded elsewhere. So when we say that it is that tariff of solar power is 2.36 or 2.44 or whatever, there is a catch in there, is that the transmission tariff is not getting reflected in those figures. And transmission tariff may be anything of the order of 50 paise, 60 paise per unit kind of thing, or 70 paise, depending on which part of the network we are talking. Now, is that earlier days, the proportion of solar generation or renewable generation is not very high. The original standard for connectivity to grid given out by CA did not have all these many of the stipulations in like for frequency control and all, and will not there. But now with the increasing this thing, it has been realized that we need to put out the requirements also for the solar plants or wind plants, such that they contribute to reliable and secure operation of the grid. So amendments were made in last year in 2019, and I'm bringing out some of those relevant things which have been brought in. One is that that these plants can be operated based on a set point of megawatt. That's okay. But the earlier that for the requirement for the frequency control was not there. It has been introduced now. It says that in the range of frequency, range of below 49.5 and above 50.05, it shall be possible to activate control systems, regulate output as per frequency response requirement. That is, for frequency deviations in excess of 0.3 Hz, the generating station shall have the facility to provide within 1 second real power primary frequency response of at least 10% of the maximum active power capacity. I am saying that this requirement did not exist earlier, and to my understanding, the solar power plants which have been built earlier, they will not have this. They will not be able to give this response. Of course, this requirement is also there, that after the publication, the plants which are being made subsequent to the publishing of this amendments only will need to meet these requirements. But what it really means, that the solar power plant is not inherently having that capacity of pitching in with the real power response, and so you will need to have some means, and that means could be separate to this. It could be a storage. There are different ways of storage which can pitch in if required to give this primary response for the frequency control. And then it goes on to set the requirement for the droop and dead band. Also for the voltage deviations, if there is a fault in the system, there may be an immediate drop in the voltage, and for that reason, that the solar plants are required to have the facility to not to go out of the system, because if they go out of the system, it will further aggravate the situation. So they have to have a characteristic as far as this curve, that even if the voltage goes down to 15%, should not go out of the system for 300 milliseconds, and if it and like that, as per this curve, they have to have this characteristic. And now that the inverters are being provided with the facilities to ride through these contingencies. Also, the photovoltaic generation or the renewable generation, they are required to be able to vary the reactive power from 0.95 lagging to 0.95 leading. Now, this can be done, and this is being done, but a issue for the developers is that they need the whatever rating, typically what the rating they provide of the inverter would be in terms of the MVA rating of whatever is the output, the active power output you are looking for. Now, if you are operating that inverter at 0.95 lagging or a different power factor other than unity, then your capacity to transmit the real power will reduce, and then you will have to curtail probably on the real power if required. Of course, nobody is providing any extra capacity inverter for the simple reason is that most of the time you are not operating your inverters at full capacity because sun is not giving you that much radiation all the time. is there during the noon and afternoon time that you get the full radiation. Other times, in any case, it is generating less. So it's like that. And then the harmonic current injections, because of this thing, they have to, inverters are to be so designed, and which is getting done is that they are as per the IEEE standard 519. These are the requirements as per the CA technical standards. Now, what these issues which we have discussed, and differences as compared to the conventional plants, what are the possible measures that can be implemented? Yes, one is that the most important is the energy storage. You store the energy and then you release the energy. You can do that, release that energy for meeting the first thing is that peak time power. Okay, peak time power, you can use the storage. For the intermittency, where when the clouds are there and all that, there also storage will help you. For the primary frequency response, whatever we talk, that if you have a storage, then you can provide that, you can chip in with that response from the, if you have a storage available. Then also through commercial mechanisms, you can have, you can shift your the load pattern and such that you give commercial signals to customers so that they use electricity when it is more readily available. Geographical spread of the solar power plants also can reduce the generation variability due to, if there is a local cloud cover, it may not be there at all the places. So a geographical spread also helps. But of course, you will put up your plants depending on also they will put, the developer will be putting their plants where the radiation is available, cheap land is available, and cheap land is available readily. They will not go and put their plant where the radiation, because then it will not be economically viable. So there is a limitation to this. And also the better forecasting tools for the purpose of helping the scheduling of power. Till last year I was engaged in this thing. We are using for forecasting, we are using the artificial intelligence and machine learning and all that. And what has been seen is that we get good forecasting results in on the days when there is no cloud. It's quite satisfactory actually. But the moment cloud comes, we were having problems. We also implemented some at the locally some cameras and put sky, what they are called sky camera. They are looking up at the sky. They are looking at the clouds and then taking minute by minute movement of the cloud, and then incorporate a cloud motion vector into the forecasting thing. This is under development and is not very widely used. But then if the forecasting improves, then the scheduling problems can get addressed to some extent. Now, as we see that major way that these issues which are coming can be addressed by the energy storage systems. And there are various energy storage options are available, which we'll be talking about. And your choice would depend on where it is to be applied and the cost in it. Cost is one very major factor, because of which implementation of storage is not there so much in our country. And I'll be talking later on in one slide and what all for encouraging this these implementation of storage, what is being done in our system. So the decision for choosing which storage option to take up will depend on the what is the power requirement at any point of time, what is the energy for how much duration, what power you want to feed, then the energy density, that is per volume, per unit volume, how much energy you can get from that system, specific power, specific energy, life of this thing, whether during the, let's say if my solar plant is installed for 25 years, how many times it may be required to change the storage system. And the cycle efficiency, round trip efficiency is that if you are implementing a battery, then for the what is the efficiency with the charging, what is the losses with while the charging, and what while discharging, as also the response time, that how fast you want that storage to give you a response. So these are the factors which will need to be looked at while considering any storage system which you would like to adopt. Various we are going to talk about the various storage systems which are possible, which are there. So the one is the pumped hydro. Very simple, and it has been there for a long time. It has been where you will have two reservoirs. When the power is available cheaper and extra, you pump the water from the lower reservoir to upper reservoir, and it gets stored there. And whenever there is a demand, let's say for the peak demand, meeting the peaking demand, or then you discharge that water, it flows down and runs the turbine, and generates this thing. You can have a reversible generator motor arrangement. The largest installation of pumped hydro available in USA is 3,003 megawatt. It's a huge, you can see, huge, and of course, this involves environmental issues, and the time required for installation of a pumped hydro or a hydro plant, we know that it takes long time. So these are the issues with this. In India, we have approximately 2.6 gigawatt of pumped hydro already operational, and another 3.1 gigawatt is under construction. Then, as we talked earlier with the solar photovoltaic, while talking about solar thermal plants, that they are inherently they have that possibility to use do the storage, and that is why we initially were very enthusiastic about it, till we realized that we do not have good enough DNI in our country. It's an established technology, not an issue, but since in our country we do not have good radiation, we are not building up the solar thermal plants for electricity production. We have for water heating and all, for that kind of thing where that is there, that is okay. But what I'm talking about, using solar thermal for electricity generation, so there it is not a option for us. Then we also have a possibility of compressed air energy storage, where you when the power is readily available, when there is a low demand, you use the electricity to run chain of compressors, and you inject that into storage vessels, either underground or overground, and when required, you can release that air to run the turbine and produce electricity. The largest installation is in Germany, and that is of 290 megawatt. This comparatively, while that pumped hydro may have a efficiency, round trip efficiency of 70-75%, this will have lower efficiency. And also the storage, identifying a geological location for storing that compressed air That's the challenge for this. If another possible storage is flywheel energy storage, where you run when you have you store in energy in a flywheel, and the amount of energy which gets stored would depend on the speed of the flywheel and inertia of the flywheel. Typically, the low-speed flywheels may be running at 6,000 RPM, and high speed might be running around 10 to the power 5 RPM, and the material for these flywheels would be different. For the lower this speed flywheels, you may have steel flywheels, whereas for high speed, you need to have advanced materials. In this, there will be possible energy losses due to air resistance. These flywheels are rotating at very high speed, so the system is put under a high vacuum chamber. But it suffers from a problem of idling losses. Good amount of idling losses will be there when flywheel is on standby. The biggest plant which I could see is a 20 megawatt plant in USA, which is consisting of 200 flywheels. Another possibility is superconducting magnetic energy storage, where you store energy in a magnetic field generated by current flow through a superconducting coil. This can give you a very fast response. But the problem is that for superconducting this thing, you need very low temperatures of the order of 5 degree Kelvin to 70 degree Kelvin kind of. So these are very sensitive to temperature variations, and also suffer from high self discharge. So this is a technology where developments are going on to attain have superconducting conductivity available at high temperatures and all that. So largest which I could see is these devices have been made up to 10 megawatt commercially. You can use capacitors, what we call supercapacitors, for storing energy in its dielectric. You can have very fast charging and very good power density, but it will have low energy density. It also suffers from self-discharge losses, and generally it is considered suitable for short-term storage applications and not for large-scale, bigger installations and long-term storage. You can also have the option of hydrogen storage, where you use the process of electrolysis for producing hydrogen, which can be stored in high pressure containers or can be supplied through pipes. And this hydrogen can be used as a fuel in the internal combustion engines or gas turbines, or it can be used to generate electricity, where those turbines can run the generators and produce electricity, or this hydrogen can be used into with the fuel cells to generate electricity. A lot of work is going on even with the hydrogen storage. And then we come to battery storage. This is by far where the maximum research and development is going on to have to reduce the cost, to improve the energy density, right? And there are various options of different type of batteries available. They will have a different characteristic, different fast involved, different depth of discharge which can be obtained for different type of batteries. There will be different energy density. And your choice would probably depend on what is the application. Like for a automobile, you would like to have a very high energy density, where it will be, and you may go for lithium ion kind of thing. Whereas for a solar photovoltaic plant, energy density may not be so important, and the flow batteries which have relatively higher density energy, lower energy density may make a bit, if they become cheaper, and overall cost, considering the life and other things, cost will be a very major consideration to choose the option. I'm not going into any detailed discussion on how this is available in the net. Then since this storage costs a lot of money, and that means the tariff would go higher, and then for a developer to incur cost on installation of any storage, there need to be suitably, this needs to be encouraged, the system, and there have been various tenders from the Solar Energy Corporation, which is a central government body, and also from the states. I have listed 3 tenders which have been there in past since last year. So there was a tender from SECI for 1200 megawatt of renewable power, which could have solar and wind, or solar or wind. But it required, but it was mandated that it will have a battery storage. Sorry, it will have a storage, not necessarily battery storage. And it was mandated that this this plant will have to give guaranteed supply of power for at least 6 hours during the peak hours, and those were identified as morning 6 to 9 to evening 6 p.m. to midnight. At least 6 hours every day they will have to feed power. It was left to have them to choose the configuration they want, how much solar or how much wind, and how much of storage. So this was 1200 megawatt was won by 2 companies. I'm not taking the names, but it is available in public domain. One company won 900 megawatt, other 300 megawatt. Now this was the peak time tariff rate which they won at was 6 rupees 12 paise and 6 rupees 85 paise. As compared to, you see that without any storage, we have gone down to, as we saw earlier, 2 rupees 36 paise. With the storage for the peak time, these are the kind of tariffs which we got last year. This tender came out last year. And regarding the choice of storage which by those developers, I understand that one company is going for pumped hydro, and other company is choosing the lithium ion batteries for the storage. So these are 2 major types of storage, I think, which we'll see more and more in our system. And of course, no bidding was required for the off-peak tariff. They were told that they will get, for the time where the power they supply during the off-peak, they will get paid at 2 rupees 88 paise per kilowatt hour. Then there was another this year there was another tender for round the clock 400 megawatt hybrid power from solar and wind. They're not exactly around the clock, but they have called it round the clock. And what is required is that they are asking for a plant load factor, very high plant load factor of 80% annual and 70% monthly. If you typically see I did mention it, for a solar plant, typically you may get a plant capacity utilization factor of 18 to 19%, 17 to 20% if you are not doing any over provisioning of the photovoltaic panels. But typically developers are providing over capacity of 30 to 50% on DC side. What this means is that if I am contracting for 100 megawatt AC power, contract will be based on the figure of AC power, and on DC side I am free to install as much as I want. So depending on, of course, on the cost consideration, so typically 30 to 40% over provision on the DC side is done. Because when I say I'm putting, let's say, X figure of DC capacity, I will get that DC capacity when the sun is giving me full radiation. The panels are rated based on a radiation of 1000 watt per meter square kind of thing. So if I am getting that, then I get that rated capacity. But when the sun is not fully there, then I don't get. So you provide a over capacity on DC side so that even during the morning and evening times you get more generation. This 400 megawatt tender, RTC tender, here the capacity, the battery or any other type of storage was not mandatory, but was allowed. The developer was allowed to choose his combination of solar and wind, and if required, they can also provide the the storage. So this was one with the tariff of 2 rupees 90 paise per kilowatt hour for the first year, and the tender had a provision for 3% escalation up to 15th year. So the levelized tariff could come up to say around 2 rupees 55 paise or 2 rupees 60 paise. This is a very good tariff which we are seeing. But personally, I don't know how are they going to appraise, because if they go for a storage, this kind of tariff probably will not support that, and such a high PLF of 70 to 80% again is very, very difficult to obtain. Let's see, when this plant gets built up, it will be interesting to see what configuration they have actually adopted at that point of time. Presently, a 5,000 megawatt RTC power tender is ongoing, where they are allowing for the renewable to bundle this energy with the conventional coal-fired plants. This is another way of probably. One thing which I didn't mention is that one issue, the commercial issue coming out of the more and more integration of the solar power is that you saw that presently we have a 370 gigawatt is capacity. The power served peak time is 180 kind of thing. So we have a lot of capacity which is surplus there, and a lot of capacity in coal-fired station is getting now not getting run, or getting run at a very low plant load factor. So which is not good for those existing plants which are getting forced to run at very low power factor, or they are not getting in any contracts. This tender probably would mitigate. I think it is designed to mitigate some part of that. That here they are allowing them to have up to 49% energy from the solar from the conventional plant, and 51% from the solar plant, or solar or wind or a small hydro. This is for RE. And this here also again they have to ensure 80% availability on annual basis, and they will have to again guarantee the power as per the requirement during the peak hours. So this again I think is a engineering of a different sort is being experimented. And I've put just want to mention that this is something which is might you may find interesting. One sun, one world, one grid. Now you see that sun at some point and globally at some place sun would be off. If it is night here, then it may be daytime somewhere. So if we can have interconnection of various countries, maybe and if those countries are having good solar radiation and they can get connected, theoretically it can take care of those peak time requirements. If you look at in case of our country, if we look at, let's say, Myanmar, so Myanmar will be is to our east. It will be 1 hour ahead of us, and if we look on the west side, Oman, they are 1 hour behind us. So we get, if we connect these grids, we can get solar energy for a longer duration. So that is the idea of this one sun, one world, one grid. Of course, it is the connecting the grids and all those that it involved the lot of complications in different countries, and they may not agree, may agree. The putting of such a large interconnections will also be whether it is economically viable or not. So the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has called for an expression of interest from consultants to develop a long-term vision document for this, and then identify an action plan and roadmap, and then what will be the institutional framework to implement this. So this is a long-term thing where the consultant will have to first identify which are the areas where they have good solar potential, and whether they can be interconnected, whether it will be economically viable or not. So this is a new development which is going on. So I thought I'll share this also with you here, and you may find it interesting. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks to you, sir. Very nicely, very widely covered.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And
Thanks,
I think
you have covered.
I have not overshot the time also.
No, not at all. And you have covered right from the grid operations and grid conditions, and then new energy sources, storage, and the last is the very interesting one: one sun, one world, and one grid. All that is quite interesting, and I think our audience will be motivated to get into these areas, because this is mundane practical details. The field practical data, which normally we don't have that. I think thank you for giving all those parameters, details. Wonderful presentation.
I hope that it is interesting and of some benefit, because my this thing point of view is from the industry, this thing, and I am not into academics. So
yeah, from that's precisely I was expecting that you collecting the data, such a useful data, we can't do it in one go. And you have done that job, and you have been in the field for a long time, so you could be able to assimilate all those things and give in one particular, within 1 hour. You have given such a lot of information, and I hope everybody will be benefited with this, because when they want to grow up and then they will submit their reports, these data details will help them.
And of course, all this is available from the CA reports or CERC, this thing.
Yeah, but people.
Yeah.
Academics normally they don't go to CEA and all that, no? Academic people will be confined to
idea
the.
was to bring the awareness of give a overview and bring an awareness of what all are there, and then one can pick and choose as to which area they want to concentrate, and then get into details of that respective
Yeah.
thing.
And whatever you said about the commercial and tariff details, nobody can get it from any whatever you have to search for. These were available on demand with you, and so we were able to get it.
But those tariff things, that commercial things, are as interesting as purely technical things. Those are and at the end of day, any new technology or any new development, at the end of day, one has to look at the cost impact. So
at the end of the day, correct. Cost factor is very important.
No engineer should think in isolation that I am doing only the technical thing without having a
precisely. You are
eye on the cost.
Yeah, this is what it is. What industry and what the utilities and the real common man looking for is the cheapest power. Unless you do the in a competitive way.
Right.
Most reliable and cheapest. And as you said, 20 years back, 48 cycles was the norm of the day. Today is 49.
We have seen it. Probably these people will not
48 to 52 like.
And a joke, let me share a joke which we used to say that sometimes looking at our grid operation, we used to see that अगर किसी को देखना है कि भगवान है, तो हमारी grid तो उस टाइम पे भगवान जैसे चलती थी. That is don't record it, this statement. But that was the situation. We used to have the large grid disturbance took place in 2012 July, and earlier it used to be two disturbances in a year, summertime and winter time. Every year we used to have large disturbances too. So that is where we have been.
Now I think you have brought in Gayatri.
Yes, sir. Sir, on behalf of KCG College of Technology, I would like to thank Mr. Vikas Saxena, Power Grid, for his. Yes, sir.
Pleasure is mine.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Your wonderful presentation and informative talk, sir. I hope all the participants take away the technical insights shared today. Thank you so much, sir.
I would like to thank Dr. Sambandhan and your KCG College to give me this opportunity to be.
It's our pleasure. It's also our pleasure, sir, to get you there. Because to get some experience. Yesterday, last evening, Mr. Krish Narendra was talking from Winnipeg.
Krish is a friend.
He remembered you. I said tomorrow he is going to talk. And so he said, okay, just send my salam. I will also call him later on. He wanted to talk to you later on. Maybe yesterday, last night he called me.
Okay, great.
He said, Vikas has first in the transmission and then went into grid generation, power generation, and now he's in solar. He has a wide experience. That was his comment. And really, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir, and thanks.
Shall we close the show now?
From my side, I don't have to say anything more.
And I request all the participants to fill the feedback form posted in the chat box, and it accepts the response for half an hour only. Now we are at the end of today's session, and day 6 session link will be sent through the WhatsApp group. Thank you all. Thank you.
If anybody has any specific questions relevant to today's this thing, maybe you can share it with me and I can respond later.
Yes, sir. We'll collect the questions
we'll do that.
and we'll mail you. We'll mail you, sir.
Right.